I came to the United States in 1970 from Vietnam when I was just 5 years old. In that year, my mom married an American serviceman there, not necessarily because she loved him, but also so she could take me to the United States, to give me a chance at life. And recognize I didn't say a chance at a life, I said a chance at life, to live another day. The war was escalating at the time and it was getting more dangerous, so my mom makes this decision to take me to this place called the United States of America. But in making that decision, she simultaneously makes the decision to leave her whole family behind. And that pained her a great deal, because if you know anything about Vietnamese culture, you know this: family means everything. You're nothing without your family. So she has to leave her mom and dad, 5 brothers and sisters, many aunts, many uncles, many cousins behind. And again, that pained her a great deal. But she felt this compelling need to take her only son to a safer place. To offset some of the pain that she had of leaving her family behind and to give me some hope, actually to give us both hope as we're flying from Vietnam to the United States, my mom tries to teach me some things that she had learned about the United States as she was growing up. She tried to teach me some concepts embedded in words that I think many, if not all of us, are familiar with. Words that sound like these: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by the creators with certain inalienable rights, that among those rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And many historians note that when Jefferson penned the words pursuit of happiness, in Jeffersonian times, it meant the pursuit of community happiness, not individual happiness the way we frame it today. So she tried to teach me those concepts embedded in those great famous words. She also tried to teach me the place we're going, called the United States of America, was one of very few places across the globe where you could come with nothing except for the shirt on your back, but end up with something if you worked hard enough. She left out the part about it's good to know people too. So she tries to teach me these things as we fly and log those miles across the oceans to give us hope. But as soon as we land into LAX, Los Angeles International Airport, step off that plane, walk in that first building, into that first corridor, people there began throwing things at me and my mom. And these were not good things. They would spit on us as we walked by. They would yell horrible words at us as we passed by. I didn't understand English at the time, but I knew these were not good words by the way people were yelling them. I remember my mom putting her arms around me, all 4'11", 95 pounds of this young Vietnamese woman, trying to protect her only son from the things that people were throwing at us. And as we'd walk along the corridor, as the pelting would become harder and harder, my mom would instinctively squeeze tighter and tighter. And sometimes she would squeeze so tightly it would hurt. On those occasions, I'd look up. I'd want to say something to my mom, but I never did. Because every time I looked up, I saw was tears streaming down her face. And even as a little 5-year-old, I knew I should be silent at the time. My mom thought she had brought us to a better place. And along many dimensions, the place called the United States is a much better place than we were coming from. But for a little 5-year-old who was being spat on and having things thrown at, it didn't seem like a better place at that time. We weren't treated very well when we first arrived. We were the outsiders. We didn't speak English. My mom barely spoke English. I didn't speak English at all. People didn't want to be in the war, and they took out their hatred of the war on us, people they did not even know. I grew up in some tough neighborhoods around Los Angeles: Compton, Long Beach, and Bellflower. I'd often get bloodied and beaten in fights I got into at school. You know, as I think back on those days, it hurt, but as I think back, it probably hurt my mom even more. Imagine those of you who have children sending your kid off to school. And for many of us in this room who have children, to send our kids off to school, there's no thought, there's no wonder about what condition they'll arrive at home in the afternoon. But imagine you have the sole responsibility of protecting, caring for a child. And when you send the child off to school, you don't know how bloody he will be when he comes home in the afternoon. Imagine living every single day like that. The guy that my mom married, my stepfather, I was never really close to him. It's hard to get close to someone who beat you when you were a minute late for dinner, who took a belt to you when you didn't finish your dinner. It's hard to get close to someone like that. But my stepfather, he got really close to my little sister. In 1984, my stepfather was convicted of raping my little sister, his own daughter. And because of that and the way she was treated by many people as a biracial child in school, half white, half Vietnamese, my sister ran away from home with a friend of hers in the summer of 1985. 1 month after my sister runs away, my mom gets a phone call from a detective in the King County Sheriff's Department, Seattle, Washington. The detective says to my mom in so many words, he says, "Mrs. Robbins, we found the other girl that your daughter ran away with. But that other girl had been sexually assaulted and bludgeoned to death." And as soon as he says that, my mom frantically asks, "What about my daughter? What about Diane? What do you know about her?" And all the detective could say was, "We don't know. There's no trace of your daughter. We don't know. There's no evidence of your daughter. We don't know. There's no leads to follow. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know." All he could say over and over is, "We don't know." That was 1985. It's 2017 now, and we still don't know. How many of you have ever heard of a guy by the name of Gary Ridgway? If you don't know him by that name, you might also know him as the Green River Killer, who murdered more than 100 young women in the Green River area of Seattle, Washington in the 80s and 90s. My sister's believed to be one of his many victims. If you go online and Google my sister's name, Diane Robbins, you'll go to a link that takes you to the Center for Missing and Exploited Children. There you can read about her case file. You'll see 2 pictures of her. The latest one that we had when she was 13 years old, and one of what she might look like today, computer generated. As you might imagine, after that phone call, life isn't so great for my mom and me, but it's especially bad for my mom, because you're not supposed to outlive your children, are you? My mom goes into this deep depression. She's already faced a lot of social pain that comes from being treated like an outsider, and now she has this. Not many happy days in her life after that phone call. But there came a time when she was happy, at least temporarily. It came in the summer of 91. That's when I get married to my wife, Donna, right here out in Michigan. My mom flies out for this week-long wedding celebration, and for a week, it's the happiest I've seen my mom since that phone call. She was laughing at people's jokes. She was hugging others. It brought great joy to my heart to see her that way. But as you and I know, all good things must come to an end, right? The wedding celebration ends. My mom flies back home to Washington State, where she's living at the time, goes back into depression. Just a few months later, in the fall of 91, I began graduate school at Michigan State University. I would talk with my mom every week on the phone. We'd share with each other the week's events. On this particular phone call in late October 91, we're talking and we're sharing. And as we're about to close, before we hang it, my mom says to me, she says, "Long," my Vietnamese name, "Long. You have Donna to take care of you now," she says, and we hang up. A week later, I get a phone call from Washington State. When I pick it up, I expect it to be my mom. But when I pick it up and hear who's on the other end of the line, it's not my mom. It's a detective from the Benton County Sheriff's Department where my mom was living. And in so many words, the detective says to me, he says, "Mr. Robbins, we have some unfortunate news. We just found your mom, and she was hanging in her shower." A week after, my mom says to me, "Long, you have Donna to take care of you now." My mom takes her own life. Up until the point of my mom's suicide, I hated being Asian. I hated what I looked like. I hated the people I came from. I hated being Asian. Why? Because over the course of my lifetime growing up, I heard so many bad things said about Vietnamese and Asian people. I saw so many bad things happen to Asian and Vietnamese people that my own brain absorbed those messages and created a negative mental model of Vietnamese people. I didn't want to be me. I didn't like me. In the world of race studies, we call that internalized racial oppression. When you start to hate the people you come from because you believe all the bad things told about the people you come from. The gender equivalent of that is when we use media messages to tell young girls and women what they're supposed to look like. And when some can't achieve that look, can't wear that right dress size, that right jean size, don't have the right skin tone or hair texture, when they can't achieve that unachievable look, they start to hate who they are, and some go on to do some horrible things to themselves. Do not underestimate the power of words and messages to tear people down. But also do not underestimate the power of words of messages to lift people up. If there's anything that was good that came out of my mom's suicide, it may be this. It broke me out of the funk of hating who I was. It reminded me of my mom and what she had done for me, to be proud of our heritage and our culture. A lot of this work that I do professionally is called diversity and inclusion. And I tell people the work of diversity and inclusion is fundamentally about caring for other people. That's what diversity and inclusion is all about. And the true measure of whether you're a caring person is not how well you care for your friends and your homies, but how well you care for strangers and outsiders. The cool part about that is this: the more you care for strangers and outsiders, the more friends and homies you get. Right? So on this Mother's Day weekend, I share with you my story, but when you hear my story, you also hear my mom's story. Because in me is my mom. Without my mom, I wouldn't be here. And I want to leave you the essence, the spirit of my mom, in some words that my mom shared with me. When I was growing up, she would say this Chinese proverb to me over and over. She would say, "Long, tall trees face strong winds." Imagine a little Vietnamese woman telling a little child, "Tall trees face strong winds," right? Never really knew what she meant when I was growing up. Tall trees face strong winds, what's that supposed to mean? But as I matured, as I grew, I figured it out. What she was telling me was this: Long, go stand tall against the strong winds of injustice. Because when you stand tall, you're protecting somebody else. So my challenge to you is to hear the words of my mom and go out and stand tall against the strong winds of injustice. But before you take that challenge, remember this: injustice at times is powerful. The winds will be strong, they will be fierce, they will be relentless. When you stand tall, when you take that challenge to stand tall, you will get tired. You will get very tired, and at times you will want to quit. But in those times when you're weary and you're tired and you want to quit, remember this: there are other tall trees standing with you. You may not see them, but they are there. And one of them is me. Thank you for your time.